I know you've done a decade or more of research on the military-industrial complex in the form of the development of the Osprey by the Marine Corps. $22 billion, I think, over...
yes, $22 billion over 25 years.
Number of years.
Right.
And so I know you know a lot about this statement that President Eisenhower made in 1961 in his farewell address to the nation, warning us about the dangers of a military-industrial complex. And I understand that you earlier, before the cameras were on, said military-industrial congressional complex, right. And that in fact is how President Eisenhower first drafted his speech.
Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
So what do you make of this? Where are those controls that President Eisenhower encouraged us to put into place? What was the lesson from the Osprey? What can we transfer from the Osprey to the proliferation of military drones?
Well, the Defense Acquisition System, as it's called in Washington, that's what professionals call it, has sort of been out of control for maybe 4 or 5 decades now. My view is that the problem is that the incentives are misplaced. The process has generally rewarded people who came up with huge projects that involved huge contracts that created lots of jobs that took forever to finish. And I think that the military has been shortchanged a lot of times because of that. There was a recent commission run by a retired Marine Corps general and former staff director of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Arnold Punaro. And his conclusion was, burn the system to the ground and start all over, because it is so cluttered with regulation and steps that it's very inefficient, and it's very politically driven, as Eisenhower warned it could be. You're never going to take the politics out of it. But I think that the thing that the defense acquisition system needs most is streamlining. The V-22 Osprey, which, by the way, was ultimately, it was an ugly duckling the first 25 years that it was in development, but it has become a swan. It is one of the best military aircraft that the Marine Corps and the Air Force have right now for the job that it does. It carries troops and cargo. But that aircraft cost 25 years and $22 billion, as we just said.
And weren't there some deaths too in
30 people were killed in 3 crashes during its development, killed 30 people. And in my book, I describe all those crashes, how they happened, why they happened, and then what was done to fix the aircraft.
And the name of your book is?
The Dream Machine.
Thank you.
The Untold History of the Notorious V-22 Osprey. Because the Osprey did become notorious, but ultimately it was fixed, and it's a good aircraft now. It's one of the safest, actually, that the Marine Corps flies. But what cost to the taxpayers, and what cost in lives, and what cost in years? And that is primarily the fault of the defense acquisition system. The Predator, the first drone, by contrast, was the product of development by an ingenious, if not a genius, aeronautical engineer who started building drones in his garage. And then ultimately, his company was bought by a larger company called General Atomics. And the technology was there when the military decided that they actually wanted a drone of this sort. It took them 6 months to produce the initial Predator. Don't know the actual cost, but it was pennies in comparison to the Osprey. I mean, it was a few $1 million. Sure. 30 million, I think, was the initial contract. And it has been a revolutionary technology. So the military has tried in the last few years during the war in Afghanistan to go to quicker forms of acquisition of military equipment, to try to buy more things off the shelf or test them out basically in combat rather than spending a decade developing something.
Well, things are moving so fast you couldn't do it the old way now.
And that's the problem. That's part of the problem, and it's part of why there is so much waste in the defense budget. Because the system is so, it's really a 20th century system, and we're in the 21st century.
Now all this is kind of an insider game, isn't it? It's a Washington-driven, the defense acquisitions and the coming availability of drones and the use of drones. And when can we expect to hear more about this, the American public? When can we? Is there a debate? Is there a forum for a debate about how these rules should be placed? I mean, what's the process going to be? Or are we going to wake up one day and there will be drones, there will be rules, we don't know how they got here?
Well, the FAA right now is taking public comment. People can go to the FAA's website, and I can't tell you exactly how to negotiate to the right point, but you can, or navigate to the right point, but you can find the place where you can put in your comment about what you think the regulations ought to be and how they ought to work. Congress will be debating some of these issues in the coming years, I know, because as I mentioned, Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, has introduced a bill. There's somebody else in the House who's introduced a bill that goes to the question of law enforcement use of drones. I'm sure that there will be other legislation going to other aspects of privacy. You know, and it is important. I mean, it's the temptation for law enforcement, and I have a brother who made his career in law enforcement, but the temptation will be to go just as far as the law allows you to try to catch criminals.
Sure.
And the task is to make sure that those of us who are not criminals don't get caught up in that surveillance system.
Well, you're researching a book now on drones.
I'm working on a history of the Predator, which I think is qualifies as a transformational technology. I think that was the drone that that led to the revolution that we're in now.